Well, I want to welcome everyone to the first session of AMSET International. I want to welcome both those that are here in person as well as those who are also joining us remotely. This is going to be the first session that we've kind of done this way, where we are trying to mimic. Sorry about that. Trying to introduce the role of perfusion registries to the community in this format. I'm Donnie Lukoski. I'm a health services researcher from the University of Michigan. I'm joined by Don Nieder from the Michigan Society of Thoracic and Cardiovascular Surgeons Quality Collaborative, representing the PERForm registry. Jim Rieger from Cincinnati Children's Hospital, who is representing the PediPERForm Learning Network, and then Vince Olshavy, who's there in the back from Norton Children's Hospital, also representing the PediPERForm Learning Network. I have the following disclosures as well as representing the PediPERForm PLN grant. So we have the following learning objectives. We want to expose the attendees to 2 national clinical registries for cardiovascular perfusion. And in so doing, we also want to provide kind of an insider's baseball kind of approach so you can learn about how these registries, is this kind of vibrato, staticky? I'm going to go off script. Provide an insider baseball's perspective of how these registries can be used to advance benchmarking of one's practice relative to others participating in the registry, as well as advance quality improvement more broadly. So as we talk about this being a collaborative learning network or collaborative learning approach, what does that mean? So we list here some of the trait or hallmarks of collaborative learning. So collaborative learning basically is the opportunity to learn about one's practice and learn about other people's practices to advance learning collaboratively, if you will. So this environment right now is going to serve as a collaborative learning environment where you're going to learn about how data can be used to advance quality improvement and benchmarking within one's institutions. And we'll talk a little bit more about that going forward. This, if you will, is kind of the Michigan model. So in the state of Michigan, Blue Cross Blue Shield of Michigan is the largest commercial payer in the state and funds or supports about 15 to 20 collaborative learning initiatives, whether or not it's for cardiac surgery, general surgery, radiation oncology, so on and so forth. And what we do is we come together virtually as well as in person to learn about one's practice and to try to break down the barriers to advance care by understanding what do you do at your center that I could learn, and vice versa, how can I tell you about what we do well so that you can learn. And we do this by doing site visits, we have webinars, we do simulation and provide content experts to come into our state to teach us about the trade of doing quality improvement. We want to foster that more broadly within the perfusion community, whether or not it's for adult or for pediatrics. And we're going to try to, again, simulate this collaborative learning model with you today, those who are remote, as well as those who are actually here in person. So the agenda has 3 items. Right now, we're out of character. We're just kind of introducing this concept and introducing what you would hope to learn from this session. We're then going to go into character, and Don Nieder is going to do that by recreating a collaborative learning environment where we actually would virtually be unblinding each other's centers to learn about what one is doing from a process improvement standpoint. So we're going to recreate that collaborative learning environment, and then we're also going to have a presentation from PediPERForm. So the in character is going to be our adult registry, the PERForm registry, and then we're going to move on to the pediatric and congenital registry. So a little bit about both registries. The PERForm registry has its inception by learning about what was done in northern New England. Bob Groom and others taught us a lot about how do you advance the role of clinical registries for process improvement and outcomes. Right now, the PERFORM registries, to my knowledge, is the largest voluntary adult perfusion database in the world. It focuses on the practices of pediatrics within the setting of adult cardiac surgery. It's embedded within a statewide cardiac surgical collaborative run out of the University of Michigan called the Michigan Society of Thoracic and Cardiovascular Surgeons Quality Collaborative. It takes about 8.5 minutes, we're told, to complete a record, and each center's surgical data is probabilistically linked to a perfusion record so that you focus on collecting information about perfusion, and then we link it to do case mix adjustment and clinical outcomes ascertainment. So the combined cardiac surgery and perfusion data allow us to understand who are the patients that you are caring for, what perfusion practices do you do, and how do those patients do subsequent to the operation. Right now, we have 48 participating centers and 124,000 procedures. So that gives you a little bit of a context about the adult side of the book of business. In terms of PediPERForm, the largest voluntary pediatric and congenital perfusion database in the world, it focuses on pediatrics and congenital cardiac surgery. It's embedded within this voluntary collaborative called the Cardiac Networks United that contains PediPERForm's Pediatric Learning Network, PC4, which is a pediatric intensivist database, and a whole family of databases that are able to share each other's data and advance the practice of pediatrics and congenital cardiac surgery. It takes about 15 minutes to complete a record. Similar to the PERFORM database, cardiac surgery data is probabilistically linked to perfusion data. And right now there's, I think, 9 centers now, right? Because the University of Michigan. 8 centers participating and just under 4,000 procedures. What we want to do is to engage the audience here as well as virtually to give us a hint about who you are, what you do within your practice. So for those who has not downloaded the app, you can raise your hand all the way up, David. There you go. Okay, so for those who have not downloaded the app, you need to download the app to engage in our meeting. So let's just take for a second. So you open up your app store and download what's called, you can't search for AMSET, but you got to search for Event Modi, EVENTMOBI. And once you download that app, you do a search for AMSET, who knows, AMSET. Add for the code. AMSET International Conference, all lowercase, all one word. Thank you, Curdy. So if someone has a question, Curdy, could you help troubleshoot anyone? So if you raise up your hand if you are having problems, but we're going to learn, this is collaborative learning. Not about perfusion databases. So this was a planted exercise where we're going to be benchmarking each other's ability to download the app.
And the event again, AMSET?
AMSET International Conference. All lowercase, one word. And that was Brenda Sturmer. We're trying to create an environment where we share each other's names. I'm Donnie Lukoski. And so once you have the app, on the top left-hand, in the app, you have an agenda, and you click on Session 1, Perform Collaborative Meeting and PediPERForm Collaborative Meeting. You'll get a screen where it has 3 tabs: Details, which tells you about the actual session, and then Polls. And we will be moving to the polls session.
Nice big Vince.
Vince was being shy, so he chose to have a picture of himself from just yesterday. It looks like it's a spitting image of him. So we have a couple of questions, and for those who still have questions about how to get on the app, again, just raise your hand and others can help support you. So we have a couple of questions for the polls. So the first poll is my center participates in. You're not there yet. All right, we will wait.
My first question is,
Phenomenal. Hold on. Does that go now? I think I had to click on the thing. Does that work better? Okay, okay. So we're going to set the tone. The tone right now is grace. We're going to give each other grace as we catch up to speed. Anyone still?
It makes you create an account and a password.
Oh, I'm sorry. But all this infrastructure work, can you imagine what the next couple of days are going to be? You're going to be like the far end of the curve, just the innovators. And you'll be able to support other people.
where's poll?
So when you open up the agenda for today's, for the session right now, there should be 3 tabs. Details, I think it's called polls. Nope, we'll get to them. Yep. We all good? Anyone still need help? Okay. So the first question that I see is I am, and there are 5 options there. So if you wouldn't mind letting us know what your practice is. And unlike registry data, we're not going to be auditing this. All right, the second question. My role in my institution is, and I appreciate everyone's patience as we get through this. Gotcha. Someone able to dim the lights? Thank you. Appreciate your help. So it looks like 63% are staff perfusionists. All I'm blind myself, I'm not engaged in clinical perfusion. I'm among the 5%. Looks like a third are directors, chiefs. Thank you so much. Directors, chiefs, or leads. I can hear myself. My family would be aghast. All right. My practice entails. So whether or not you only do adult cardiac surgery, pediatrics only, adults and peds. So it looks like 20% do adults and peds, 65% only adults, and It's got to be someone who wants to gamble. Three threes in a row. 13.33% only pediatrics. Is this speed okay? We good? So, has the propaganda been working? Who has heard of the PERFORM registry? Report honestly. So 50-50, I'm rounding. This is great. I appreciate everyone's time. Next question, and we do not mean to exclude any other databases that are out there, but right now we're only focusing on the PERFORM one. How about PediPERForm, the Pediatric Perfusion Learning Network? 70-30.
We'll call that 50-50 too.
50-50. Can you, really, you can round down from 70%?
Oklahoma math.
Gotcha. The Department of Education has an opportunity. All right, that looks like 50-50 according to Jim. Maybe not everyone has entered their data, so. Okay. Next question. What is a reasonable, so we're trying to assess, if you were going to participate in a registry besides zero, I guess zero was there, no cost. In your opinion, even though it may not come out of your own department's pocketbook, how much should it cost to participate in a registry, a collaborative learning registry? So we will be talking about the products that we actually deliver to address that 50% of you who say it depends upon the product we receive. And we aspire to having no cost, 1 out of 5, to meet your needs. However, it does cost some money to support the registries. We want to now ask you about what types of registries your centers participate in, so you can select more than one option here. Whether or not it's your company's database, like Scope or Core. Scope is specialty cares. I believe Core is comprehensive care. Participates in the perfusion registry. I'm sorry, Core is Orum's, I apologize, registry. Participate in the PERFORM registry, a different perfusion registry. You collect perfusion data only within your institution for quality assurance and improvement. Well, I'm not sure. That's what the yellow one is. We don't participate in one, but you may want to in the future, and then others. So it looks like 33% collect data for local QA and QI, 15% participate in a database of some kind. That's great. I think we have one more question. My center participates in, now, let's say that you do participate in a registry, what do you do with it? So whether or not there's a form for you to review and benchmark your perfusion practices only, to benchmark perfusion practices and surgical outcomes, right? How do your patients do afterwards? You don't participate in, or there's not one provided to you to review and benchmark practices, and my team doesn't collect perfusion data. So it looks like a third do not have a forum. 30% have a forum to focus on perfusion and surgical outcomes, and a fifth only perfusion. So according to Jim, that 32% is 70% if you round up. So now that we have a sense of our community, we're now going to go back to the slide deck.
All right, so thanks for that, Don. I've had an opportunity a number of years ago to watch one of those collaborations a long time ago, and it was really in its infancy, and it's really grown. And this is something that I'm going to talk about, the PediPERForm. Thank you. I haven't had that much light on my face in a long time. You're not going to like what you see. I'm going to go over PediPERForm really quickly. And there's a, the PLN, the PediPERForm Learning Network, and Perform have some things in common, but are actually very different. But PLN tried to kind of stand on their coattails and on their shoulders to really learn from what they've done, building a very, very good, as you just saw, a very small part of what they do, a collaborative to improve patient care based on the data they collect. So we started out with some very smart people from Perform, Donnie Lukoski, Theron Paw, Don, a number of people helped us get our legs under us as we began this process of developing PLN. I don't have a lot of time here today, but just to tell you, that's kind of what we aspire to, but we are not even anywhere close to that yet. We're still in our infant stages of growing the collaborative, growing the registry, signing new participants, and I'll be talking more about that on Sunday. So if anybody's interested in more information on PLN, and we'll go into quite a bit more detail on what we're doing there. But today I'm just going to kind of show you what we're collecting, maybe a couple of quick examples on why we're collecting it, and then just some of the display, the way we display some of the data so that users can get to it. So the variables that we collect, Donnie indicated that the Perform collects perfusion data, marries it with STS data. We do something very similar. We collect the STS data from the local level though, and it's very limited when STS likes to change what they collect in relations to perfusion, anesthesia, even surgery. So we don't want to be beholden to them about what they think is important. So we just take the meat and potatoes, the kind of stuff that we don't think they're ever going to stop collecting, which is like bypass time, cross-clamp time, procedures, diagnosis, and that sort of thing. Everything else is collected through the perfusionist, and there's really not a whole lot here that shouldn't be part of a standard perfusion record. If you got a solid perfusion record, whether it's written or electronic, the stuff that we ask for should be included in that record. And again, that kind of goes back to the AMSEC standards and guidelines as well, where there's an appendix that shows what makes up an adequate perfusion record to correctly show what occurred during the case. So just quickly, we collect personnel data, perfusionist and surgeon, and that might scare some people, but that data is not unblinded. So to the other participants within the registry, the way we work blindedness is we allow different reports, and I'll show you examples of them here in just a second, where you get the aggregate data, or in the other reports, you can get your institutional data or your perfusionist data, and I'll show you those some examples of those in just a second. But I can't see Michigan's breakdown data by perfusionist by case, but I can see their aggregate data. And nobody else can see Cincinnati Children's, but I can go down and look at our departmental data at the departmental level and work on our variability within our center. And I'll talk some more about that in just a minute. And Donnie, be sure to keep me on time because I know at 3 o'clock we got the next one. So other stuff, equipment, this is kind of the first question at the bar when people are talking about perfusion. What do you use? What kind of oxygenators? All that kind of stuff. What size circuits? At least for pediatric perfusionists. What kind of equipment? Also temperatures. Temperature separation of bypass. The highest arterial outflow temperature, which again is an AMSEC standard. What kind of cardioplegia you're using, how much you gave on a given case. Blood gas management is an alpha stat or pH stat, and at what temperatures did you incorporate those. Lab values, which let us look at anticoagulation, renal function with creatinine, hematocrits, and lactate. We also look at fluid management. So fluid management and fluid balance is really it's a big deal across whether it's pediatrics or adults, but it can be a really big deal in a 2-kilo baby. So this is something that we're really trying to help people with that may or may not look at it as granularly as it can be done. So we look at the prime volumes, whether you muff, cuff, duff, or Z-buff, residual pump volumes. If you count the prime volume as an in, you got to count what's left in your pump as an out, and that's a big piece to accurate ins and outs, urine outputs, washed volume on bypass, what you lost to the cell saver, and then what you gave back. And we have standard definitions for how you calculate what was lost to the cell saver versus what is given back. And it may not be perfect, but with everybody doing it the same way, we have the ability to really have some solid data to be able to do research on, so that we know that when I say I lost 100 cc's to the cell saver during a pump case, that can be accurate, at least within the collaborative and the participants within that. Blood products, of course, other techniques, what you did on bypass, so conductive perfusion. Did you do RAP or VAP, A&H? Did you use vacuum? We collect the procedures and the diagnosis, as I mentioned, which is kind of a standard. Those come straight from the STS. And then we look at a few post-operative variables as well. And those are hematocrit, lactate, so the peak lactate over 24 hours, first lactate in the ICU, first creatinine in the ICU, peak creatinine at 48 hours, and also a 24-hour chest tube output. So we collect all that data post-operatively, and those are just the few pieces on the post-op data that we look at that aren't necessarily included in a complete pump record. So what do we do with all that? Perform will send out on a quarterly basis reports to their sites so that they can see the graphs, one that they shared with you here a minute ago. PLN has set up a situation where in near real time, each participant can go to the website, to the desktop, and see their dashboards and how they look against the other centers, and then also look at their own data. So what you'll see here, right now, this is the set of reports that we currently have available to participating centers. Case mix report, that one's just kind of a demographics report, what kind of cases you've done, how many you've done, the case types, was it a benchmark procedure, was it not, and those sort of things. The data quality reports are just some easy reports that help you make sure that all of your data is in PLN as it should be. The equipment reports, we talked about that a little bit already, and that's just kind of a description of what was used during the case, what oxygenator, what size pump tubing, those kinds of things. Blood product reports, both during bypass or in the prime, as well as by anesthesia before or after pump, and I'll talk a little bit more about those in just a second. Prime reports, what you did to your prime, not just prime volume, but what's in it, what the constituents are, and how you treated it. Did you P-buff? Did you wash cells in the cell saver? Those kinds of things. Also, bypass reports. Again, this is more conduct of perfusion reports, the techniques that you employed on bypass, such as acid-base management techniques, also bypass times, clamp times. This is one of those fun parts where I get to tell my surgeons that we are not the fastest folks on the planet. And they say, oh, well, we do more acute cases. And I'm, maybe, maybe not. But you can use this internally, and that's just one example of it. Fluid management reports, we talked a little bit about that, but and I'll go more into depth on that on Sunday. And then the lab parameters reports. Now, what you see here is the three columns, and the first one on the left is the blinded site report. And that is the aggregate data for all the sites. Thanks, Doug. That is the aggregate data for all the sites. So you'll see your site, and then you'll see the rest of the sites for whatever measure you pull up. Then there is the perfusion comparison report where it's appropriate, and that's where you can pull up the same measures, but you can break it down by perfusionist within your institution. And then there's the institutional report, which is the aggregate data at your own institution, not broken down by perfusionist. But there you can sit there and you can break it down by surgeon or by case type or by weight, whatever you want to do. I'll give you a quick example, a couple quick examples here, and then wrap it up. This is an example of the blinded site comparison. So when you look at it as a particular institution, the blue bar will be you. So this is Cincinnati Children's data, and then everybody else is in gray. This is just a demographics report showing how many neonates were done over the course of time that I selected in the date range. And it's just an easy way to describe how we use this. Now, if I wanted to look up a particular technique, let's say I wanted to go from a 3/16 arterial line to an 1/8 arterial line. Because why do we need this? Why do we need to be able to blind these sites and then unblind them? I want to know who's using an 1/8" arterial line. I can do that in the equipment report. I can then look at the number that's associated with the site that shows where they use an 1/8" arterial line. And I, being the clinical champion for my site, can go to the locked key and find out who the clinical champion is that's associated with that site number. And then I can call them and I can ask them, what size patients do you use that on? What flows do you tolerate? What line pressures do you tolerate? How do you connect an 1/8" to a 1/4" cannula? All these different questions that I might have about implementing this new thing, and I don't have to do it on my own. I can reach out to people and ask them how they did it, and I can be a lot more comfortable when I go to implement that than I might be if I just try and make it up on my own. If you're not the clinical champion at the site, and I want to stress this, you cannot unblind those institutions. You have to have that key code, which is stored on a secure site, a PLN site, and then you have to be able to access that. And that number changes annually as well. So it's one way for us to implement some data security, but still have a little bit of flexibility on our own to reach out to each other and learn from each other. This is, again, I'm going to start talking even faster because I got about 2.5 minutes left. This is an example of the blood utilization report, and this is the blinded site comparison report. Just with the descriptive data, I can look up here and I can see that, okay, two of those sites in those short orange bars, that's FFP use. They use a lot less FFP than everybody else. If I'm thinking about getting rid of FFP, I'm going to call them and ask how they do it. This is a institutional perfusion comparison report. These are the perfusionists that work at my institution right now. We practice very, very similarly to each other, and that's on purpose. We try to minimize our variability within our institution. So you can see here, there's very little variability across the board there for perfusionists. This happens just to be an example of last hematocrit on bypass, and then, post-protamine hematocrit. So we all try to target the same thing. And you can see here, we all practice pretty much the same way. And this is over 3 years worth of data. One of the last two slides I'm going to show you here is just how we display continuous data. So for example, temperatures and those kinds of things, hematocrits off bypass. We're going to use both average charts, but also we're going to use box and whisker plots that show us the median, the interquartile ranges for those. Also, we've got the ability to look at the lactates and the anticoagulation profiles for all of these and display them in the same manner. And this was, like I said, this is very quick examples of just some ways that we display the data. If you're a participant of PLN, you could log on today and get that information. You can look at all of your site's data. You can look at the aggregate data. You can look at the blinded reports. You can break it down. I could go in and I could break it down to all my cases that I've done with one particular surgeon and see what the outcomes were there. And then I could look at the aggregate data compared to everybody else and see how I compare. Not just within my institution, but to the entire collaborative. So that's what we're doing right now. Very, very early stages. Our future efforts, we're going to be performing a database update this year, which is really going to just clean up some definitions, as well as add anesthesiologists to that list. So we can do a combination of perfusionists, anesthesiologists, and surgeon within our own institution. We're going to develop more reports, which is going to tie into the PLN meetings. This is really an effort of the collaboration. These reports that you've seen up here have been developed and come up with by the PLN Executive Committee. But we don't want to run the show. We want the collaborative approach from all the participating centers to tell us what they want to see. What kind of reports do they want to see? And through those meetings, we're going to be able to have those conversations and decide what it is that's going to be readily available for the whole collaborative at just a login. We're also looking forward to it being able to implement continuous data. So instead of just collecting the first crit on bypass, the last crit on bypass, the lowest crit on bypass, a lot of people have the ability to just record that by the second now, whether it's with a CDI or with a Viper EMR or Connect or even Epic, and pull all that data in. So we'll have the whole continuum of data. What's the blood pressure of the entire case? What's the flow of the entire case? What's the crit of the entire case? All those pieces. And then that will be really, really powerful to being able to generate some QI work and some research work in the future. And then the last one here, which is the last one, but not at all the least one, is doing stuff just like what was described here today by Don, and letting us get together and have an open forum and an open conversation about where I'm not doing a very good job, and being able to directly talk to somebody who is doing a really good job on a particular topic. So thank you very much for your time. I appreciate it. I don't know how much time we have for questions because we've got another session running in right after it, but thank you.
Perhaps in maybe just saying. For those of you who are online or here in person, as we transition to the next session, if you want to come